File system layers. The layered file system is oriented to increase the efficiency of how data is stored, accessed, and organized in the file system. Depending on the file system configuration, the number of layers that are used may vary. Unix and Windows file systems are different and have different numbers of layers. For Windows file systems, 5 layers are used. These layers represent the process from the user's interaction with a graphical interface in the Windows environment, allowing them to work with files, directories, or different file types, down to the physical location on a storage device and how the data is stored. The physical layer uses block storage to write data into a storage media. This layer manages how data is read and written into the media that is stored. The physical layer also defines where the data is physically stored. It can be a HDD, SSD, USB, thumb drive, or any external storage devices. The file system layer in Windows. There are multiple file system configurations: NTFS, EXFAT, FAT32. Depending on the file system configuration in this layer, it uses different structures like file allocation tables or master file tables. An example of the configuration for this layer will be NTFS support files larger than 2 terabytes. It has features like file permission, allows compression and encryption to the files. FAT32 can only handle files under 4 gigabytes and cannot be used in storage media over 4 terabytes. The logical layer defines hierarchy of how data is stored in the file system. This has additional characteristics to the files and directories, such as metadata management that adds information to each file and directory. The metadata contains information of size, timestamp, name, and attributes. This metadata is crucial during an investigation. Another characteristic will be the indexing solution that the logical layer implements. In general, the logical layer is created to allow easier navigation and quick access to files and folders without scanning the complete storage media device. The user interface layer can be explained as the file explorer in Windows, where you can manage the files and directories in your storage media. You can move, copy, cut, paste, organize files in a graphical way using this layer. There are different types of user interfaces, such as File Explorer, Command Prompt, or PowerShell, each one with its own capabilities and method of managing data. Analysis of the MBR, hosted or non-hosted data. The master boot record identifies where the computer operating system is located in the hard drive and how to load when a computer is turned on. Before loading the operating system, the computer follows a series of processes. One of these processes is the master bootloader. The hard drive contains a spinning platter with a magnetic coating. The read-write head moves horizontally to read and write information from the spinning platter. In a hard disk, data is stored in a tiny concentric track on a disk surface, which is arranged from the inner to the outer edge of the platter. Each circular path on the surface of the disk is called a track, where information is recorded magnetically. A circular sector, also known as geometric sector, is a portion of the disk. Each track is divided into sectors. A disk sector is the minimum storage unit of a hard drive that has a size of 512 bytes. A computer file system cluster is a unit of disk or cluster of sectors allocated for files and directories. The first sector of the host disk goes for the MBR. That is a small piece of code that is located at the beginning of the hard drive, and it's only 512 bytes in size, that is, 1 sector space. Bootloader code. The first 446 bytes are reserved for the bootloader code, which is responsible for loading the operating system into memory. Partition table. 64 bytes of the MBR are reserved for partitions, which have the locations of the partitions on the disk. The partition table is divided into 4 16-byte entries, that each entry is reserved for each partition. Boot signature. The last 2 bytes are reserved for the boot signature, which is a 2-byte value that indicates that the MRB is valid. It can be used to boot the system for valid MBR and has a value of 0x55A hexadecimal. When a computer is turned on the CPU, it sends a power good signal to the motherboard and checks for the BIOS firmware. The BIOS program first evaluates the system hardware and reads the first sector of the disk, which contains the MBR bootloader. The BIOS loads it to the memory and transfers the control to the bootloader. At this point, the bootloader examines the MBR and looks for the partition entry that is marked in the partition table as active. The active partition is the one that the computer will use to boot. Once the bootloader has identified the partition, it looks for the first sector of the partition for the boot record. This is a small program check for a valid good signature, and it is loaded into the memory and executed as a program. Then, the boot record loads the operative system files into memory to allow the boot sequence to continue in the operative system. The hosted and non-hosted data of a disk resided of the difference between the accessibility of the disk space by the user. The hosted data is all the space that is accessible for the disk during the use process, all the free space and occupied space with file system or user information, that is, what is called hosted data. The unhosted data is the space that is not accessible to the user or the operative system. It refers to unallocated space on a disk. If a partition is deleted but not prepared or formatted for use, that will create non-hosted data in the file system. The unhosted data can hold deleted information, which can be recovered during a forensic physical acquisition. The forensic software will analyze the unallocated space on the disk and will try to retrieve information from it. The hosted data will be used to create logical images of the disk when targeted acquisition is required. The combination of the MBR with unhosted data leads the investigation to modification on the data in the hard drive. If unhosted data is encountered during the analysis, this can be a result for data deletion from the custodian. The forensic analysis will try to retrieve the data, but it will depend on the integrity of the sectors that hold the data. If those sectors have been already reused, could result as corrupted files, but partial recovery. Different methods can be applied for unhosted information, that is, data recovery software, which will analyze and try to recover the sectors that are unhosted and will try to recover the partial data into a readable file. Metadata layers. Metadata is a way to know some things surrounding a piece of information, so that we have a better idea of what that information is when we look for information about a digital file. There are different levels or types of metadata called layers. These layers, depending on the type of information, can be a crucial aspect of an investigation. The metadata is embedded into a file and can explain aspects of it, such as size, name, location, timestamps, author, last modified, last accessed, etc. The layers of metadata are the following. Descriptive metadata. This layer of metadata provides information about the content of the data. It will help us to understand what this data is about. Some of the information that this type of metadata has: its author, keywords, description, timestamps, owner, etc. This metadata drives the ability to search, browser, filter, and index. Structural metadata. Structural metadata refers to the organization of the data, the hierarchy relation between different data resources. This type of metadata's key function is improving the presentation and exploration of collected data, ensuring that there is an efficient way to navigate through complex sets of data and knowing the relation between them. Administrative metadata. The administrative metadata contains information for maintaining and managing the data. It contains timestamps information of creation, modification, last accessed, access permissions, ownership of the data, and previous versions history. It sets the base for the provenance data. Technical metadata. The technical metadata provides the technical aspect of the data and the storage locations that it is. It helps to understand the type of files, size, resolution of an image, color depth, file format, encoding information, compression information if there is. This metadata helps to understand how the data was created and placed into its location. Provenance metadata. The provenance metadata creates a history of the data since its origins and ensures the integrity and authenticity of the data. This metadata saves records of modifications and changes made, with timestamps and modifications applied to the data. If there is a modification at some point in time of the life of the data, this type of metadata will have information. Geospatial metadata. The geospatial metadata contains geographical information that can be used to locate the data creation in a geographic information system. It contains the longitude and latitude of the location of the data. The accuracy depends on the device that created the data, but it will hold information of the geographic location. Contextual metadata. The contextual metadata contains additional information that provides understanding and relevance of the application of the data. For example, in an investigation, Tagging evidence with some information will be contextual metadata, or creating relations between one data and another one create a contextual importance of the data. In conclusion, the metadata layers have an important role in the data organization and management. They provide information about the data that is retrieved and creates ways to organize, arrange, and search data. This helps during investigation to understand the integrity of the data and its preservation. Pointers and inodes. The pointers are references with the physical location of data blocks in a disk. They are used to create links to the data blocks in the storage media. The function of the pointers is to link a file that is created to the blocks that is hosted in the storage media. Some files may not use contiguous blocks because they are occupied or the file size is bigger, and when fragmentation is present, the blocks may not be contiguous. The pointers work a link to those blocks in the disk and create a more efficient way to access and manage data. The pointers work in conjunction with the inodes. The inodes can save sets of pointers information to locate the data in the storage media. The inodes are structures of data that store metadata information and pointers to data blocks. Data blocks contain files in a physical sector of a disk. The metadata that the inodes store about a file are file size, device ID, user ID, group ID, permissions, timestamps, pointers to blocks. The inode can contain sets of pointers that will have the location of the data blocks of a set of files. This is used by the file system to identify the location of the data and its accessibility. Inodes use pointers to connect to the physical data blocks of files. When a file is accessed, the file system retrieves the inode first to get the necessary metadata and locate the data blocks via the pointers stored in the inode. If a file is small enough, its data may fit within the inode itself, using direct pointers. For larger files, the inode may contain indirect pointers, leading to additional blocks that hold further pointers to data blocks. File systems, ext2/3, NTFS, and FAT32/16. A Linux file system is the underlying software component that provides access to data on a storage device. The three most popular Linux file systems are ext, x2, and x3. x2, the second version of the ext file system, was released in 1993. It added support for larger file sizes and extended attributes. x2 is the oldest of the file systems and is still used by many Linux distributions. It is a very stable file system, but it does not support features such as journaling or extended attributes. It does not have logging features, so it is not as reliable as the other options. However, it is also much faster than the other options, making it a good choice if you need maximum performance. ext2 is known for being fast and stable. However, it does not support journaling, which means data can be lost in the event of a power outage or system failure. x3, the third version of the ext file system, was released in 2001. It is an extension of ext2. It added logging, which helps prevent data loss in the event of a power outage or system failure. x3 is a logged version of x2 and is therefore more reliable. However, it does not support some of the newer features found in other file systems, such as extension-based allocation or delayed allocation. It is also compatible with most major Linux distributions. The difference between x2 and x3 are feature, ext2. x3, individual file size, 16 GB to 2 TB, 16 GB to 2 TB. Volume file system size, 4 TB to 32 TB, 4 TB to 32 TB. Default inode size, 128 bytes, 128 bytes. Timestamp, no support, second. Defragmentation, number, directory indexing, disabled. Multiple block allocation, basic, pre-allocation, number, in-core reservation, delayed allocation, number. FAT16 is a simple file system that uses minimal memory and has been used with the DOS operating system. It originally supported an 8.3 naming scheme that allows file names of up to 8 characters and file name extensions of 3 characters. Later revised to support long file names, FAT16 is limited to supporting up to 2 GB storage systems. FAT32 was released with Windows 95, although this file system supports larger drives. FAT32 has a file limit of up to 4 GB and a maximum volume of 2 terabytes on the drive volume. Its advantages are that it is highly compatible with different operating systems such as Windows and Linux. From the very beginning, NTFS is set for enterprise file systems. In order to reduce data loss by sudden power cut or system collapsing, the file system should always guarantee the integrity of metadata in the file system. In order to protect the sensitive data from illegal visits, there should be a comprehensive security model in the file system. In order to protect the user data, the file system should provide an inexpensive data redundancy plan based on software, instead of an expensive one based on hardware. Advanced features of the NTFS, New Technology File System, which is primarily used by Windows. High-level features of NTFS, multi-data streams, name based on Unicode, general index mechanism, the dynamic bad cluster reprints maps, supports POSIX 6, file compression, file encrypts, disk quota, hard link and soft link, link tracks, log records, fragmentation. NTFS treats files as a unit of attribute/attribute value. That is the difference between NTFS and other file systems. File data is an attribute value without names. Other file attributes include file name, file owner, and file time mark, etc. Watch the following video, Explaining File Systems, NTFS, EXFAT, FAT, 32, EXT4 and more, by Explaining Computers. MFT entries. The NTFS, New Technology File System uses a master file table MFT that contains an entry for every file on the volume, including the MFT itself. Each entry holds information about the file, such as size, timestamps, and permissions. As files are added, the MFT grows, but its size does not decrease when files are deleted. Instead, their entries are marked as free for reuse. The NTFS, New Technology File System, is a robust file system used by Windows operating systems that manages how data is stored and retrieved on a disk. A key component of NTFS is the master file table, MFT, which is essential for tracking all files and directories on the volume. The MFT consists of a series of entries, with each entry corresponding to a file or directory on the NTFS volume. This includes not just user files, but also the MFT itself. Each entry holds vital information about the file, such as the file size, indicates how much disk space the file occupies. Timestamps includes creation, modification, and last access times. Permissions defines who can read, write, or execute the file. Data content, information about where the file's actual data is stored on the disk. Growth of the MFT. The continuous use of the MFT makes that when a file is added to the MFT, it increases its size. But if a file is deleted from the MFT, the space that was occupied by that file is marked as free for the user. This still creates an entry, which means that even if the amount of files is reduced, the MFT won't decrease in size. The allocated space is free for use, but it still holds the previous data in the data block until it is used for another file. MFT zone. NTFS reserves a specific area of disk space known as the MFT zone to keep the MFT contiguous as it grows. This helps improve performance and reduces fragmentation. Space for files and directories is allocated from the MFT zone, only after all unreserved volume space has been utilized. The allocation strategy depends on the average file size. Large files. For volumes with a small number of large files, the unreserved space is typically allocated first. Small files. For volumes containing many small files, the MFT zone is allocated first. Fragmentation. Fragmentation occurs when space becomes limited, leading to scattered allocation of files and MFT entries. If the MFT zone fills up, new MFT entries will have to be allocated from the unreserved space, increasing the chance of fragmentation. Defragmentation of the MFT. The process of defragmentation helps to optimize the allocated space of each file in the MFT. What it does is that it looks for contiguous space in the disk to allocate data blocks, but if there is not enough space in the MFT zone, it can create corrupted files during the defragmentation process, or in case of power outages. A successful defragmentation will increase the performance of the MFT and how data is accessed and stored. To check the current MFT size, users can analyze the drive with Disk Defragmenter or use the FSCTL Get NTFS volume data control code. Access times is the time delay between a request to an electronic system, in this case the disk, and the access to data being completed. In a computer and software system, it is the interval of time in which the instruction is sent to the disk. Then, the disk creates the mechanical move of the platter and write-read head until the data is returned or written to the drive. There are different factors that can affect the access time on a disk or storage media. A HDD that has a mechanical component inside to read and write to the disk takes a longer time than an SSD that is created by only electronic components of high data transfer speed, as it uses flash memory without any moving parts. It is well known that the SSD speed can reach 10 times faster than the HDD, due to its architecture and new technology on the data transfer and file system. The file system configuration can also affect the access time of the data. The NTFS configuration offers different features, like indexing and journaling, that will improve the access to data in different types of operations. A good indexing or file system arrangement can increase the performance of the data read or write process, reducing the access time. Fragmentation can impact the file system configuration and access time of the task. Windows have defragmentation procedures that, with the good configuration of the file system, increases the performance of the access time. The access time can be impacted by the file size. Smaller files are accessed in a more efficient way, reducing the access time. The larger files are stored in different data blocks that can be non-contiguous, and this will increment the access time. But if there is a large number of small files that need to be accessed or copied to another location, the access time will increase, impacting the performance of the task, even if a single file of the same size is accessed. This is because the disk is trying to locate the multiple files in different sectors of the disk and trying to organize the access with the volatile memory. There are different tools that can be used to benchmark the disk speed and access time to the data. One of them is HDTune. It reads the temperature, the write and read speed, maximum rate transfer, health of the disk, information, and, if there are any errors, it will scan for bad sectors. HDTune, https://www.hdtune.com, download.html. To optimize the access time and performance of a disk, there are multiple strategies that can be used. Try to replace the HDD for a SSD as the main disk for the operative system. HDD can be used as a secondary drive for storage of data that is not regularly accessible. You can increment the RAM memory for the system to perform continuous operation at a faster speed, without waiting for the volatile memory to be cleared. Formatting your disk with the latest technology of file system, NTFS, is recommended for a good usage of the read-write process to the drive, as a regular maintenance defragmentation can be scheduled to be activated after a desired time frame. This will reorganize the file system storage protocol and test with benchmarking tools for monitoring of the performance. Chapter 3. Forensic Analysis of Windows Operating Systems. External Analysis. We have been using different versions of Windows operating systems over 2 decades. Windows is used to communicate, create text documents, presentations, watch videos, plan our day-to-day activities, etc. In the majority of homes, there are more than one computer that uses Windows operating systems. Cybercriminals are using Windows operating systems, either to carry out cyber attacks or as targets in cyber attacks. When a Windows computer has been involved in a cyber incident, it is essential to investigate that Windows machine as soon as possible. The process of acquiring evidence of a Windows computer, preserving it and processing it, formerly referred to as Windows forensics. We normally use applications like Microsoft Teams, Outlook, Word, browsers, etc. Some of the evidence that can be collected from a Windows computer are evidence of when such applications have been used recently, how many times they have been used, what activity was performed using those applications, what credentials were used to open the applications, the profile that accessed the application, timestamp modification of creation, modification and deletion of a file, etc. When you create, modify, or use a file in Windows Explorer, a record of your activity is maintained by Windows, something as simple as renaming a file. If we have a Windows computer that was involved in an incident, it would be extremely beneficial to understand which files and folders underwent modification recently. When we don't require a file or folder, we delete it. Cybercriminals will do the same, assuming that deleting the files will get rid of it. However, it is possible to recover deleted files, along with information of when the file was deleted. Analysis stages. The analysis stages are not well defined. Each author has his own opinion of how many stages are and what should be considered as the stages of the analysis of a Windows computer. The basic definitions of the stages are 4: preparation, acquisition, analysis, and reporting. Each stage is of high value and it should be followed in the correct order, because it cannot continue without the previous one.